Lynsey Addario is a Pulitzer Prize winner and advocate for human rights, and now she can add author to her list of credentials. But it's her work as a critically acclaimed photojournalist that has brought her to the attention of the world. Her pictures come fresh from some of the world's most challenged societies, and they've been described as completely unique. Lynsey Addario joins me now in the studio. Lynsey, first of all, that's a heck of a label, really, completely unique. What is it you think that makes your photographs different?
I'm not sure they're so different. I think I'm just pretty tenacious and driven to cover these stories year after year, and I've been doing it for almost 20 years and in war zones for 15 years.
Yeah, the opening scene of It's What I Do has been described as a sucker punch that hits you like a cold, hard fist. What do you make of that description?
Well, it takes you through the beginning of my kidnapping in Libya. I was held hostage for about a week in Libya during the uprising, and I open the book with a scene from that kidnapping.
And what the scene is when you're stopped, when you're initially stopped?
Yeah, it starts with earlier in the day and sort of leading up to the fighting coming closer and closer and us making a decision finally a bit too late to flee east. And as we flee east, we run directly into one of Gaddafi's checkpoints.
So I'm very interested in this because 15 years ago I was a foreign correspondent and pregnant with my third child at that point, and I know other women who work as well in that area. But we're always in the minority in such an obvious way.
Sure.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, there are not that many women working on the front line, and it's 2015, and to me it's a real shame that we don't see more female colleagues. I think in that specific instance in Libya, I had a feeling something was going to happen and we were staying too long, but I think because of my gender, because I'm a woman, I was hesitant to say anything because I didn't want to be the only woman saying, can we leave now? So I sort of kept my mouth shut. And had I been a man, I wonder if I would have been hesitant to speak up. So I do think it affects the work.
Do you think it helped you in that situation to remain low-key? Was that an advantage at that point?
I think once we were taken hostage, yes, it did help to be a woman. I think, and Anthony Shadid, who has since passed away in Syria, he wrote me a long email after we were released saying, I think had you not been there, we probably would have been executed, because a woman in those instances really gives the captors pause. So yeah, I do think it helps.
Even with extremists, do you think that that's the case?
I do. I think that, you know, who knows? I mean, there's not logical behavior always, but I do think that a woman in the Middle East and a woman in those situations is often, it sort of throws people off.
Yeah, so there's two issues here, isn't there? There's the way being a woman means that you're treated differently should you be captured. Sure. And is there something that you think a woman brings to your actual work, to the photographs you take, that is directly related to your gender?
Sure. Well, I happen to work in the Muslim world primarily, so those are societies that are often segregated by gender. So for me, I often have great access to the women and the men because there's no limit to me spending time with men, but also I have access to women and women at home and women in very intimate settings.
So there's a difference because you have access, but do you think there's also a difference in the type of photographs you sometimes take?
Well, because of that access, I can take photos that my male colleagues can't necessarily take, so definitely.
And also, I know that you've just told me you have a 3-year-old child. Do you think that being a mother makes a difference to your work?
Yes, it does. I mean, before I had a son, my mortality did not matter as much. I was willing to take risks I'm not sure I would take at this point. So I think it definitely affects my work. I still work in war zones. I still go to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and South Sudan, and to countries that I've worked in the past, but I try to stay one step back.
Yeah, but also there's great value in that because although you may not be in the front line, you may not be taking some of those very, very dangerous hard photographs. Some of the photographs that make the greatest difference to people are when they see family life continuing to go on in such dangerous places, for example.
Exactly, and ironically, those are the stories that have always interested me, and I always sort of get drawn into the front line just because I'm there. But for me, the most interesting stories are the civilians and are the families and how life life goes on in these war zones, because we often don't see that, because it's the combat that makes the most dramatic images. But really, the images of families and women and children are incredible.
I mean, if you think about Steve McCurry, for example, and the Afghan girl, I mean, that photograph is so famous, and it is only a portrait of one girl.
Tell me about it. I've been working in Afghanistan for 15 years, and every time I go, everyone says, "Are you the photographer?" No.
Yeah. So you must have had some other close shaves as well, and some key stories, key moments in your career across 15 years that matter a great deal to you. What are a couple of those?
Well, I think probably one of the stories that impacted me most was I spent 2 months embedded with the 173rd Airborne in the Korangal Valley in Afghanistan in 2007. And Tim Hetherington and Sebastian Younger did a documentary on a similar place in that area called Restrepo, so if that rings any bells. But that was incredibly intense. We were living on the side of a mountain in a bunker for 2 months. At the end, there was Operation Rock Avalanche, and we were ambushed by the Taliban, and it was very intense.
Yeah. I mean, very, very courageous work, and really, really well done. I'm going to make every effort to take a further look at your work. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me here on Arise News.